Hi everyone, it's Trina here at John's Furniture Repair, and I'm starting this chair today. So it's in pretty bad shape and it's going to need quite a bit of work. I'm not sure if the customer wants it refinished, but definitely there's some major issues going on here and issues that are not easy to fix. So let's take a look. Okay, so right off the bat we noticed that we've got a big old problem right there. This piece has been broken off and also has a pretty major break in the back here. The laminates are kind of coming apart. You can see it's starting to crack there and continue to get worse. I see that there's a nail there, a nail there. This piece is unsalvageable. Okay, so to get this top section off, first, I'm going to take these screws out. They're actually screws with a non-threaded area in the middle, so they look like the rods. Had a sneaking suspicion these were stripped out of the top, just because there's a lot of movement there. This one's coming up. Not all the way, they're kind of rusted. Yeah, they're just kind of turning in the rusted. I think this thing's got, well, what usually happens with bent wood, if it starts doing that kind of stuff, is indicative of water damage, because when you add water back to bent wood, it wants to straighten out again. But yeah, there's a lot of rust on these nails, which is pretty weird for being up here. Maybe this sat outside. Okay, so now that we've got the top part off, we need to get this threaded rod out. So we'll need to get this bolt out here. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Thing is just covered in disgusting varnish, but I'm not sure if the customer wants this thing refinished. It's a bit of a nostalgic piece, but nonetheless it'll be good to, so I mean that happens all the time. The rod starts turning on you, so then you got to grab a vice grips. There we go. Now we'll need to get this out of the seat. There's a little washer there. And I'll get a punch. There we go. And then we got one side out, so we'll just get the other side out. Okay, so we got both of the threaded rods out. Now, not to be too careful with this piece. I'm just going to knock it right out of the, looks like we have some broken pieces. Previous glue job. This thing is really a piece of crap. Good learning opportunity. Anyways, so there's that piece that we've got to make. And I need the curvature to make that new mold with. Okay, so I've got one of the ends of an old butcher block that I've been hanging on to in the shop for a while, not being used for anything. So I thought I would make my bending form out of it. And so I'm just going to trace out half to right to this point, and I'm actually going to put a pin right through there, and then I'm going to flip this over and do the other half, because we don't have this portion, and I think that this is actually pulled out and this radius here is off, so I'm only going to be using this half of my piece for reference. So I'm just going to make a couple of like I'm going to put a pin in this side here and probably one right here as well, so I can just flip it and do the same thing on that side. Okay, so I've got my final form here, and it's definitely a little bit undersized to account for a springback on my bend. So even if it is a little bit too bent, I can usually pull it out when the wood is still plastic after it comes out of the steamer. So I always like to overbend a little bit just to account for, you know, maybe a half inch of springback. So that's already in set. Pretty much I'm gonna get it attached to the workbench. I've got my steamer pipe set up here, ready with the angle. So I've got a drain pipe at this end so that the excess water can escape here. And this is where my steamer will connect into. And then inside I've just got dowels running through the middle so that it can sit a little bit closer to the top, so it gets the max amount of steam. And those run all along the length of the pipe. This is a really long pipe, but sometimes we do longer stuff, so I thought I'd use a long pipe. And this is where the steam can escape from at the end here. And then I just got a little block of the same stuff we used for the form to hold it at a little bit of a incline there. So that's ready to go, and I've got a cap here that I'll screw on after I get all my wood in there. And I've finally found something that is a little bit more suitable. If I can just get around this thing here. I've got a piece of ash, and it's really straight grained, which is gonna be much better than what I had before. So you can just see like there's barely any runoff, which is when the grain runs off the side of the piece. These grains run almost the entire length of the piece that I need. So that's really good. The only problem with this lumber is that it is kiln dried, and you do want to use air dried lumber, but it's really hard to get a good piece of air dried lumber. So it's just gonna mean that I'm steaming it a little longer than I would need to if I didn't have kiln dried lumber. So to prepare this piece, I'm gonna cut it down to our finished dimension, which is a 1 1/4 inch square piece. And then I'm going to also chamfer off the edges. That just helps keep the wood together a little bit when it's bending. And you know, if you have a sharp edge, it kind of wants to flake off a little bit more. So having the piece softened at the edge helps things lay down and stay down. And I had to order a bending strap. And so that should be here tomorrow, and that'll just hold everything together, and I'll explain what that is when it gets here. So let's cut this piece down. I've got the table saw set up and get it ready for the steamer. So you guys got to see my best new friend in action here. I've actually had this machine for, almost 8 or 9 years. And I only recently got it working. It was given to me by a dear friend who is now in a nursing home, and it's a gorgeous machine. It is a jointer planer combo made by Hitachi in the good old days, and really fitting in with my green team here. And it's just on a cart right now, but I will be installing it on these cedar planks. So it's kind of up off of the floor, but not higher than the table saw, so I can still run full sheet stock through that. And yeah, it works like a gem. It has been tuned. I've got new safety switches put in. The only thing I'm missing here is the cover, which was always missing. So that's pretty scary. I'm gonna leave it unplugged all the time just because I don't want someone coming and pressing the on button and having open blades spinning. So I'm still locating one of those. And I would like to also do a better attachment for a dust port here. Inside here is right where the spinning blades are. So it's a really way too close for comfort for me, and having a daughter running around the shop and stuff. She knows not to touch the stuff, but still, I'm gonna probably make just a plastic housing that comes out where I can attach my vacuum to, which is what I use for dust collection in this section. We don't do a ton of carpentry per se. We are always cutting and doing little pieces and stuff, but not like major production cutting all day kind of thing. So I just use my vacuum, and it gets hooked up to sanders and the down there on the dust ports and everything like that. So it takes out most of it. But yeah, so there's a couple things I need to do on that one, but that is a machine. If you know carpentry and you know machines, you know what I'm talking about. This is the dream that I have been waiting to get working forever. I had a little Makita one that I've been using, which barely does anything. Did the job for a couple of things, just one of those little guys that someone gifted me a long time ago. And it's really nice to get some proper equipment. You saw how nicely it did a job there. So yeah, really, really excited about this. So I've got my piece of ash all figured out, and I'm just going to take a 1/4 inch round over bit on the router and do all 4 edges to get that cleaned up. So I'll get that set up. Okay, so I was going to use a 1/4 inch round over bit, but it's doing a little bit too much. A little bit too much than I want. So I'm just gonna basically be easing over the edge with my plane. I don't want anything more than that. And then I will give it a little sand just so it's eased, but I want more, you know, just more of a square edge. So I did these 2 sides, so I'll just flip it. Here, and I'm just gonna run past twice. And that's enough to just take apart that sharp, very pointy edge. And these are all necessary steps if you want a good result when you're bending. Skip any of these steps and you're going to be spending a whole lot of time for nothing. It's a lot of work to set up, and you want to kind of do yourself a favor and take all the necessary steps. Okay, while we wait for the straps to come in, I've attached the form to the workbench here so it's nice and sturdy to clamp up against. And I'm gonna figure out which clamps I'm gonna use too, so everything's here and ready. I just talked to the customer and she would like everything to stay as original as possible in terms of the finish. So we're just gonna do the minimal repairs, and I know this isn't very beautiful, but it means something to her. So we'll just leave all of this character right as it is. So the only thing is, although this has a gap here, we'll have to putty. It's not moving, this crack, but this crack is definitely moving. So I'm going to split this apart and get some glue in here, get a couple of clamps. Someone has added a piece of wood to the bottom of this at some point, and I'm not going to remove that. We're going to leave everything as is. Every bone in my body wants to rip this chair apart and do it right, but sometimes that's just not the thing to do. So we'll repair this crack, repair this dowel back here that's broken. We have it. And this one as well. We'll try to get these out of here so we can do a proper repair. And wait for those clamps to come in and then get it all back together. Okay, so I'm gonna put a splitter clamp on the legs to split the seat open, so I can clean out all of this garbage that's in there. I don't know if you can see, but there is a ton of stuff in there that's not gonna really allow the crack to come back together very nicely. So we need to get that out. Little bugger. Oh. Okay, so we're gonna get some glue in the middle of this piece because it did split here. And this is a little hole that we made. Keep it down like that. And then I can get my clamp in here and put some pressure on it without it sliding. All right, so we've got this other guy that's broken and it looks like it's been repaired before. There's some glue in there, it looks like old glue. So I'm just gonna take my little scraper which is right in front of me. And I'm just gonna get some of that glue out of the fibers. This would be really nice if I could get this to lay back down. I mean, it's not gonna be perfect because once you've repaired a fiber break like this, you really have kind of messed with how the fibers lay in the wood. Okay, so I got it all cleaned out. Just wanna see if these are going to sandwich back together. You know, you want to have it lined up perfectly for all of those little fibers to go. It's actually pretty great. So I'm just going to get some wood glue in here again and sandwich that together. I'm going to come at it this way here. I think that worked a little better for me last time. There we go. Awesome. Yeah, so I'm just going to clamp it this way first and then give it a little bit of tension, pushing all those fibers back together. So we'll just hold it steady there, not too tight, because I still want it to move. And then I'm going to just get a clamp lengthwise. Here. Well, I can't do it, guys. I cannot just leave this seat. It's broken here, it's broken here. This one's starting to move. I gotta take this apart. And if I'm gonna do that, I'm sanding this seat down because it's ugly as hell. And I'm removing this board underneath it because it's holding the brakes together and I can't get the glue out and that won't be a good repair. And that's just gonna be how it's gonna be. I just can't leave well enough alone. You know, how is this? This is not doing anything. It's not helping. Everything's a mess. Yeah, so these steel heads you usually were visible in a recessed hole right here. So someone had puttied them before, and this is a chip out here. We'll have to putty that later. But There we go. Now we can actually clean up the glue off of these points. I was getting most of it, but not all of it, that's for sure. Especially not in the little tongue groove area. So I'm gonna put this in my vise and I can use my scraper to get this all really nice and clean. It's just so much stuff jammed in here. I don't know how you could ever expect these laminations to come together nicely. Or for any new glue to hold. So now that I've got all the glue scraped off of the edge, I want to be able to put this thing flat on my glue up board, but it's got so much stuff on the bottom. So chunks of glue and paint and everything. So we got to strip this stuff off of here. There's no way. So let me grab some gloves and get this thing rolling. Give them a quick cleanup. Okay, so I've finished sanding the seat and putting the cracks, because the glue ups were done once before, so there were some cracks on the surface that still needed to be dealt with, but I'm not going to putty anything else on this seat. There's little dents and holes and scratches and things that I'm going to leave. As you saw through the sanding, I did get rid of a lot of really deep gouges and scratches that someone who did this put in there, which didn't look natural, but I'll leave all this natural distressing because what's left here is looking more authentic. So I got also this guy out of clamps, and you can see right here our glue up and how it's looking there. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And I do need to chip away some of this glue here. And there's a really thick layer of paint. I think they just painted brown over top of all the different colors of paint, because it would have been maybe too much work for them to get it all off. Anyways, I'm just gonna get off the glue globs, and then I'm just gonna putty this, and we'll just be touching it back up to the rest of the piece, because I'm not stripping this. Okay, I'm just thinking about the color here, and it's an ugly color, and redoing ugly colors is really tough, actually. Making kind of like a muddy paint like they painted over this thing, when you're just kind of referencing kind of a globby brown paint over everything. Now, I don't want it to look as bad as theirs, but it has to fit in. So it kind of has to look that bad, but not completely. So I've got some of these old master gel stains. And this one is special walnut, or American walnut, and this one is special walnut. And they're pretty much the same. This one has a little less red. So I'm gonna try this one first. And you can kind of leave them on like a glaze, which is helpful in these types of colors. This one hasn't been used for a while, so it's just a little bit goopy with the skin. So I'm going to try a little bit of it on the underside of the seat here and see if it's anywhere close to what I'm looking for. So it's kind of looking about along the lines of what I'd be going for. And it's got kind of the reddish, goldy, reddish, buddy thing going for it. But I need to do a really gross application of it. So I might kind of leave a lot on, kind of like that. So it's a little bit streaky and kind of muddy over the whole surface. You can kind of see a little better there. Yeah, so it looks like it's a good match. So I think I'm going to stick with that. And we'll just be really careful with the application. Now, there's no way it's going to be as ugly as it was. And the cracks are all fixed and things are better in that way, but we do need to still kind of make it fit with the rest of the chairs. So sometimes you gotta make something a little bit ugly to get it to look good. So let this dry and sand it, and then we'll get everything stained up. Okay, so I've got it all stained up. It's just drying, but it looks like I never even made it look better because it still has lots of character. And it's looking pretty good with the dowels here. It's hard to see this color on the iPhone. Yeah, so we've got our repairs here. They're just drying. I've got them in undestained too. And the seat is a little light compared to these guys. I might add a wee bit of toner after this dries for a couple days, just to get it down a little bit more into the muddy zone. But in terms of, you know, this piece here, it looks pretty bang on there. So I'm gonna let this dry and head inside for the night. All right, so I've got this thing with a little bit of tint on it and a clear coat and just sanded here. So I got it glued to the chair here now. And I've got these bolts put back in through the seat, down to the first rung there. And I'm not gonna be reputtying this. It's just gonna look just like that. And that's how it's supposed to be. So it'll just get clear coated so you won't have the white dust everywhere, but it'll look just fine. It'll look more appropriate than what was there, which is something like this. So now that I've done that, I'm gonna dig this putty right out of here. So I'm just going to get a sharp chisel in there and get rid of all this stuff. These were always meant to be shown, and the putty just kind of cracks as the chair shifts and moves. So I'll just give it a little bit of a cleanup here with my steel brush. Perfect. When we clear coat the chair, it'll look like it's supposed to be there. So I'll do the other side and keep waiting for clamps. It finally came. Nothing like cutting it close to Christmas projects. Anyways, here it is, my Veritas steam bending clamp. So here's the steel bar that the wood's gonna connect to. And I'm just gonna carefully cut a couple of these. There we go. So they give you lots of extra length here to use. Although this clamp is a pain in the butt, it's kind of necessary for steam bending because of the fact that wood does not really stretch more than like half an inch, and if that, before it splits. So you really need to work on the compression factor for, look at that, they send you a ratchet. Like, I have 17 million of these. They could just lower the price on the clamp and not give me a ratchet. Okay. Anyways, so this is for 1 1/4 inch stock, which is what we have pretty much. And this is your stop. So you're going to actually butt up your wood end here up against one end of the clamp. And then on the other end of the clamp, you're gonna have a piece of wood that you're gonna need to put bolts through. I'll give you the socket and everything, even an extension. Guess it's my wood bending ratchet. I don't know why we need specific tools for, seems overkill. Anyway, so these are gonna go through the strap and another couple of boards are going to be on there, and that's where the other side's going to butt up against you, but it's kind of hard to explain, so let me just get it set up. Okay, so hear that. We've got steam coming out of here, ready to put the cap on. This guy is working hard for me, so I'm going to stick the blank in. And I'm going to time it for 2 hours. There we go, it's about in the middle, right there. And grab my cap. Not going to put it on super tight. Just close it up. And there's a little bit of water dripping here, so I'll grab my pail, put that underneath, because that is where the drain is for the steam. I can just go in there. So that's gonna go for 2 hours. And it's a pretty long thing. We should be able to pretty soon see the steam coming out of here. Once it builds up all the way. It's got to fill the whole tube of steam first. Eventually. Okay, so I've got everything set up and ready to go. So my blank is going to sit in here, and I've actually put some plastic tape on the strap because I'm going to leave this blank in for quite a long time, probably a day. To let it really solidify before I start working with it. So I don't want the metal in contact with my steamed hot wood that long. So basically this is the stop on one end here, and this is my adjustable stop. So funny, this whole ratchet setup only fits this. They did not make it the same size as this bolt, or that bolt, or those two bolts. I guess you have to have your own wrenches for those bolts, but this one right here, they give you an entire ratchet for. I think it's kind of ridiculous, Veritas. Come on. Anyways, whatever. So I'm ready to go here. Basically, I'm going to fit, this is my, this big 2x4 here that's kind of extended a lot longer is my lever that I'm going to be pulling everything around the form with. And the blank is going to sit in here, and I'll adjust it so that it's pretty tight with that guy. So just until the band starts to kind of come off of the piece, and then it'll be clamped here. And then once that's tight here, I can clamp this whole section to my form, and then I can start bending that around. And as I go, putting clamps on my form all the way around until I get to here. So I'm going to take it, bend it all the way around, clamping till I get to here. And then I'm going to have to remove this clamp, which is fine because it'll have a whole lot of pressure to keep it there. And then I'll clamp this whole situation to my form here, and that's where it'll live for a while. So that's the plan. Better knock on a lot of wood here because lots can go wrong, including the entire piece just not being air dried. It's kiln dried, so the wood might fail, but I've done everything I can, and I've got it steamed for a lot longer than they would recommend, so just to give it that extra moisture. Now I feel like an idiot. I thought I grabbed a heat resistant tube, but I did not. This is hilarious. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, right guys? This is pretty funny. I just wanted a quick steam chamber without having to build a whole box. And I thought I should have grabbed ABS or something else. Anyways, I'm an idiot, but it's still smoking in there. It just looks real bad. And maybe it's not sitting perfectly in the middle of the pipe because there is no middle of the pipe anymore. But you can laugh at my expense or say mean things to me if that makes you feel better. But it'll be steamed for all it's worth. So next time I'll just have to go through the trouble and build an actual wooden plywood steam box. Which, I mean, if I had more time and it wasn't Christmas, I would have done, but I was trying to pull off a quick one here. Anyways, so I got about another 45 minutes of that in there, and then we'll get it on the form, and I'll try to get it some good angles so you can see me sweating to try to make this all work. Oh my goodness, that was stressful and so much work, and really could have used some extra hands to bend this thing, because that was a lot of force that I had to put, and my table started moving. I had to set up these clamps to bring it together at the very end. But I think we have success. I was really fighting at the end with trying to get this part down onto the table here. It really wanted to pop up. I don't think I should have taken the clamps off while I was coming around. I thought it would stay there, but it didn't. So I ended up having to do these kind of cowl situations where I'm pushing down on this with a little piece of wood here, and then it's attached on either end of the bench to kind of push that whole thing down onto the table. Same thing there, where I'm just pushing down on that whole form with this big 2x4 and keeping it there in the form. So I don't think it's going to be a perfect bend, but I don't think it's bad at all. I think it's pretty successful. You can see here in the end, I backed this off here, this stop a little bit, because my form here is starting to come off of the piece, and I can't really seem to tighten it a lot more here. So it doesn't have a lot of support here. So it was just breaking away right there. And I don't know, I don't want to I don't want to force it too much anymore because it's under so much tension. So I think I'm just going to leave well enough alone. Like the only thing I could really do is give this another little bit of a tight, and I don't have much left here to go, so can't do too much. It's kind of scary putting things under so much pressure because that's just kind of hanging on by a bolt there. So, I mean, if I was doing 15 of these, I would have a way better setup, but I'm just doing one, and it's gonna be fine. And I'm gonna leave this overnight and hope to and pray that I don't have an explosion when I walk in the shop tomorrow morning. But yeah, I've got it pretty centered. I've got about a 1/4 inch off the end of this one, same with this one, and it is a little long because we have to shape it to the end of the old piece here, like that. So I'm okay with the little bit of damage. This is actually the bottom of the piece. So the top is against the workbench, and yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed, this comes together. Okay, so I've kind of been procrastinating. I've left this thing in the clamp all day and all last night, and that's a lot more than it needs. So thought I'd get this thing out of clamps, even though it kind of gives me anxiety. But here we go. Just watching for how much of that spring back I'm gonna get. And I did allow for about 1/2 inch. Seems to want to go quite a bit. It's making me kind of nervous. I'm gonna back this off. It is bouncing off the form here. Still has some tension to go. I'd say we're at about, oh, a good 1/2 inch spring back here. I think it's a little tight in here, and this is actually pulling it off of the form. So what I'm gonna do is back this off even more so that it feels free to move. Take these guys off. So I think the strap clamp is pulling it out. It's not gonna bounce back that much. I hope. Want to get it out of there. There we go. Well, that's a pretty good spring back. A little more than I would like, unfortunately. We'll see how it works, because I really did overcompensate my form, so we'll see if I did enough. So I'm just going to put this on the floor. Yeah, that's quite a bit. Spring back. But pretty successful in terms of no breaks along the bend on the outside there. And we don't have any crushed, wrinkled areas on the inside here. So let's just look at our old piece here in comparison. It's definitely too wide. So what I'm gonna do is leave it in clamps. There we go. It's like really overbent. See how we are against the form here. A little better situation out of it. Mostly a successful bend. I don't know why it bounced back more than probably over an inch. Maybe just because it was kiln dried instead of air dried lumber. So anyways, we'll let it sit and then check it out tomorrow again. All right, so this thing did relax and is not sprung back as much as I thought it was. I think it was the end clamps that I had compressing it so much that wasn't allowing the linging to spread out and do its thing. It is wider than this one, but this one is very much distorted. It no longer has its shape. You can see it's got a big bulge out here, and this shape is not open anymore. So I've tried this piece on the chair a few times, and just to see how the angle lines up with the dowels, and it looks really good. Everything's kind of centered in the piece there. So I've decided that this is gonna work. And then also another check to make sure is how this piece is gonna fit on here. And yeah, it looks really good. And this piece is also distorted. This last end here has kind of flared up, so it'll work. We'll put it into compression and get it to look pretty good. But next step is cutting this off. So I've got the angle marked here on both sides, and we'll take it to the bandsaw and give it a cut. I've got everything shaped here and a little bit of a sand. And now I got to figure out where I'm going to be drilling holes. Now, a couple things about the old piece and why it failed, which is always a question I ask in the world of repair. Two parts it failed, here and there, and a little bit here as well, actually. But let me just show you a couple of things about the areas that failed. Now at this point here is where this wood had to bend the most. And so, I mean, once it's bent, it's not under a ton of strain anymore, but the lignin in this area of the wood has been stretched and maybe a few pieces teared. It's just not the strongest area anymore. And what the makers did was drill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes right through this section. And they had a couple holes here too, same side, didn't fail, thank goodness, starting to. But once you've got something that you've bent into a shape and you've asked it to hold on to itself in that shape for 100 years, and then you go and drill right through the lignin of this wood so many times, you're really asking for trouble. And some of these holes are drilled way too deep. These little dowels that fit into here only need to go in about that far, in my opinion. They've drilled them past the point of where this even goes in. So they're almost drilled, I would say, at least 3/4 of the way through this piece. The other problem is they've decided to use these very large screws as rods, decorative rods, instead of what I've seen in the past is just a rod that is barely sunk into this piece, maybe like 1/4 inch, and then 1/4 inch on that side. And so I'm going to change that. We are not going to be drilling these as deep. This is not a structural part of the chair. You're barely leaning on this piece up here, and it doesn't need to be held that tightly. Little dowels go through here. We only need at, maybe 1/4 inch coming in here. These guys, I'm going to use them again, but I'm going to actually be removing this entire shaft and only leaving a 1/4 inch that goes into this. We're not going to be putting this screw, you know, all the way through the entire piece and creating that big hole where strength is no longer there. It's just going to be decorative. We'll epoxy things in, make it as strong, but we need this piece to be the structural entity. So the other part of this, where it broke, is again, a bended area where there's pressure from people pushing in and sitting down on the chair a lot. And they've put 2 holes right here where that pressure is. Now the first one is for the main dowel on the seat. And that's again gone in more than 3/4 of an inch through this piece. And the second one is this metal rod. Now, for one thing, you can see it's not centered. It's way off to the side here, which is a main reason why it tore out this way. And the rod has been sunken really deep, and we've lost a ton of the wood. We don't need to go that deep. We can just sink it past, like, not even maybe 3/16 of an inch past the main wood, and the rod can go through without taking out most of the meat of this piece. The other side, you know, same thing, really, really close to the edge here. So we had, you know, a tear out right from the factory where all this wood was just really compromised, and we've gone through more than half of the meat of this piece. So all these things I'm changing about the new piece, and I just think this is poorly made and not really thought out when we're dealing with this. So first things first, though, I really do need to find my placement, and that's going to be tough because I really don't have a lot to work with here. When I put this piece up, the distortion of it really makes it hard to get a proper alignment, but we're just going to do our best and check it a million times with the chair until we have all these dowels figured out, and then we'll deal with the rods and the secondary piece there. Okay, so I just got it laid out on the chair here, which is the best way to figure this out, I think, just because that piece is so messed up. I don't even want to use it for a reference. So I'm going to get a measuring tape and just measure my clearance here, and then I can shift it from side to side and see where we're at. It's a little bit off here now. So these can kind of bend and move as well. They're not static. So I've got 2.5 here, 2.5 here, more like 2 3/4. Just back that off a little bit. So I'm going to try to center that dowel there and just clamp it down lightly onto that piece. Just recheck that measurement again. Definitely be forcing this a little bit, but not too much. Like, these are all very movable still, so I like the fit a lot more than the other one. We got 2.5 here, a little bit more than 2.5 there. Just gonna bring this forward a little bit. There we go. 2.5, good. Okay, so that's good. Now I'm just gonna work around the chair and see how we need to shift. I think the most different part is that these come in a little bit sooner. And that was a little bit of a, with my, when I undersized my form, I should have maybe made it a little bit wider at this point, but it's okay. We can force it back into there. So I'm just gonna position everything so I can mark it with a couple clamps, just to make sure that it is gonna move that way for me. And just take a look at it visually and see that it looks okay. And I'll just recheck it with this piece again too. This one kind of goes in like that. That looks good. Yeah, so now I'll just take a pencil and basically just mark down on both sides where this is landing. So I'm just looking where it's landing here and just marking where these guys are. And then when I take the piece off, I'll be able to bring those lines across. And put these dowels right in the center of this piece so we've got the best strength situation. Good. So I'm gonna do that on the outside too and get it back on the workbench. Okay, so I've got those all marked out and just recheck them carefully to make sure they looked good. So it's time to bring them across. So I'm just going to line up as best I can my 2 different points and bring a line across here on every single one of them. Okay, so I've got the arms or armrest fit onto all the dowels. Nothing's under too much tension and looking like a normal chair, so that's positive. It's just dry fit on here. Obviously nothing's glued in right now. So I was gonna do this placement before drilling, but I really just wanted to have this where it is gonna be for sure before I went and centered all of the top pieces. So I can do that now, figure out exactly where the backrest is gonna sit. And once I've got that figured out, then I can figure out my metal rods that I still have to put in through the seat here and then up there as well. So let me get to all of that. Okay, so I've got that all marked out and drilled with a 7/16 bit. And as you would remember before, on the old piece, they drilled these things way too deep. I don't think they need to be that deep. So I only want to go down maybe 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna need to trim these dowels to only 1/2 inch long. So I'm gonna be taking off probably maybe 1/4 inch of each of these. And then that way I can keep, you know, at least a little more than half of the meat of this bentwood part here all intact. And at the same time, once I get those, well, I'll cut those first, and then after that we can deal with those screw posts and see how long to make those. All right, so I got a little trim on all of these guys and they're sitting in there nicely. And they're only about, you know, 1/4 inch deep. So I've got all of this meat here. And same with these guys. They're not as far drilled. I didn't trim these guys off, but their holes were way deeper than their actual dowels. So we've got a lot more structural integrity already. So the next part is these screws. So I'm gonna take this piece off. I can do that one-handed. And what I'm actually gonna do is screw these back into where they were. If they screw anymore, they're kind of stripped out. And I'm going to trim them the same length as these dowels and then only do a hole as long as, like, same thing, 1/4 inch here, so that we're not putting a whole steel post right through the entire piece. It's just going to be decorative, and I'm going to epoxy these dowels in, so we're going to have structural integrity. But again, you don't really lean on this back as much as you lean on this piece. So this is the main thing that needs to hold the weight of the person leaning backwards. And this is totally, you know, substantial enough to take whatever is left on the upper part of your back. So let's get these screwed in and then figure out where we're going to cut them. And I'll probably just use a hacksaw, and yeah, we'll just glue them in like everything else.
Hi, sweetie. Mwah. I love you so much.
Okay, so I've got those drilled and they're all fitting really nicely, and that's all good. So I've got most of everything figured out. Last thing is these rods that go through the seat. So I'm just going to kind of hold them up here straight and make a mark with where I want them to land here. About right there. And I'll do my countersink first. And I'm just gonna angle it the same as my dowel. There we go. So that'll work. Let's do the other side the same way, and then we'll get on to prepping this thing for stain and finish. Okay, so we've got everything drilled and got this thing final sanded. So time to get some color rolling. So we'll just do the same stain as we used on the seat. And try to make a good mess of it. And I just want to get this colored and tinted close to what the rest of the chair is before I install it, so I don't have to do like a bunch of colorwork while it's on the chair, because that's tough. You got to mask off a bunch of stuff. I don't want to do that. So it's got us a lot closer in the zone. Still needs color though, so there will be some tint work, but we're definitely almost there. So I'll let that dry overnight, and then we can hit it with a couple toners tomorrow. Okay, so I've got this in the booth here. I'm just going to add some tint to it. Oh, no, thank you, Paula. I'm going to use Mohawk's medium brown walnut. Just to add a little bit of orangey yellow depth to it. There, and just take a look at it. That looks pretty good, but I want to add some kind of dark reddish bits as well. So I'm going to grab some medium brown mahogany, which has a little bit more of the red. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Just trying to figure out what I can do to get a little closer. It is pretty much bang on right now. Maybe I'm just trying to make it uglier somehow. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of raw umber just to muddy it up a little bit. Give it kind of those dark spots. Like this one has dark bits around and all over it. And the back is specifically got quite a bit of darkness to it. So I'm just gonna add that in areas right where the kind of dirt buildup would be, which is around the arms. Just give it that uneven, dirty kind of look. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. All right, so it's time to glue this thing up, finally, just in time for Christmas. So I'm just gonna get some epoxy rolling in all these joints. So I'm just gonna work my piece around the bend, try to get things lined up here best I can. I'm gonna get one in the other. Pop these guys through. And there'll be less, hopefully enough thread to make it through the seat there, I think so. Because we did put them as far into the chair as they were before. Yeah, I could get a nut on this one, but I think I'll drill it, countersink it down just a little tiny bit deeper. So I'll get a punch and knock this back out. Good enough for that side. Just gonna kind of see where we're at here. I think I should be able to get just a couple threads on. Hopefully. Okay, so we got that all in. Now I'm gonna get the back going. So I'll just glue these into the dowels into the back first. And these steel rods are, we screwed them in before we cut them off, so they're in there. Good, so that looks all really good. It's too bad I had to drill a little bit farther into here, but that's okay. We will deal with that and kind of smooth off the edge here and make it look kind of worn like the seat is on this one. So I'll just kind of maybe use a chisel and just kind of chamfer that edge on both sides and just throw some stain in there. And yeah, so I'm gonna let this sit probably all day and overnight. And as a whole, I think it's looking like it matches the chair and everything is doing what it's supposed to do in the color world. So it's always good to take a step back and just take a look and make sure you're getting the look you're going for. So yeah, I've got that kind of muddy, darker finish that matches the back here a little bit better. Those little splotches of raw umber that we did, just to make it look a little bit dirty-ish in the finish. But in a whole, I think we've got it looking pretty good. The seat might be a tinge bit red, so in our final finish, I might hit it with the raw umber a little bit, but that's just getting picky at that point. So let this dry and then we'll finish it up tomorrow. All right, there she is, all back together and finally finished. It's quite a lot of work for one chair and a good learning opportunity. So it looks really great back together. I did just kind of finish over the whole thing so it's all one even sheen, which helps the color read the same. And yeah, so this is our piece here that we made. And I kind of burnished the arms with a little bit of steel wool. And we've got this hole kind of open and looking worn. Everything's kind of fitting in together there too. At the back, everything's looking like it's supposed to be there. And you'll remember we repaired this rung and this rung here. And we glued the seat, had 3 splits. And we did refinish the seat, so kept it with a lot of character. And then we just finished over everything else, so it was looking a little bit freshened up. Took out the putty on all of these rods and glued everything back together. So it is sturdy and looking beautiful and ready to go back home for Christmas. So this was a long one, guys. Thanks for joining me on this video. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. And please do click like and subscribe and check out all of my videos that we have on John's Furniture Repair YouTube channel. That just helps me to be supported. If you want to support me in another way, if you look in the description of this video, there's a link in there to buy me a coffee for supporting me as well that way, just to help me to continue to make this stuff for you guys to enjoy. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and that you can enjoy your families together. So cheers.